Okay, so the two main takeaways I would like everybody to take from this demonstration around Strategus is that Strategus is a new vision for Odyssey network studies that aims to simplify the R infrastructure requirements for network sites. Network studies will specify their study design in a JSON document that fully encapsulates all of the inputs and choices required for performing the analytics. And I'm going to show you how Strategus facilitates these two goals. So to maybe level set a bit, the current state of Odyssey network studies consists of the following steps. So you would first create an R package for executing the study that you've designed. You would next distribute the R package to different network sites via GitHub. The different Odyssey network sites would download, configure, and run the R study package, which can be a challenge. And the results are reviewed and contributed back by the study coordinator, or back to the study coordinator. So with Strategus, we have a slightly different vision of how network studies would work. So the first step would be to install and configure the Strategus package. And this would be a one-time setup that you could do. Next, you would create a JSON document to specify the analytics study design choices. And then you would distribute that JSON document to the Odyssey network sites via the same GitHub study link. And in this scenario, network study sites would just download the JSON document and then execute the study via Strategus. And again, results would still be reviewed and contributed back to the study coordinator. So at a high level, how does Strategus work? Well, Strategus is basically orchestrating different Hades modules. So Hades packages are encapsulated as modules for use inside of Strategus, and then Strategus uses the JSON analysis specification to install those modules and prepare the R environment for execution. And a Strategus module at a technical level is basically an R project. That R project is used to call one or more Hades packages to perform an analytics task based on the JSON input specification. The modules themselves use an R package called RENV to basically capture all of the R package dependencies, and Strategus then uses that to set up the execution environment to make sure that it has all of the necessary libraries and such to perform the analysis. The modules expose a settings function that is used to actually generate the JSON analysis specification, and this is part of what I will demonstrate in a moment. And then the modules can enforce Odyssey best practices for running specific analytics steps. So for example, like computing diagnostics for a cohort method. So in the Strategus demo, I'm basically going to use the, I would say, study question that we have used in the book of Odyssey, which is, what is the risk of gastrointestinal bleed in new users of celecoxib compared to new users of diclofenac? And so for this study, we're going to design the study from the ground up, and we're going to run it against the Eunomia dataset. And for those that have not maybe used Eunomia, Eunomia is a toy CDM that has basically a tailored version of the data required to run this specific study question. So we'll go through the steps for creating the analytics specification, and specifically, we're going to use 4 new modules that we've developed, specifically the cohort generator module for generating the cohorts needed for the study, the cohort diagnostics module to empirically evaluate the cohorts used in the study, the cohort incidence module for computing the incidence of GI bleed in new users of celecoxib and diclofenac, and finally, the cohort method module for performing the comparative cohort study to estimate the risk of GI bleed. We'll then go about creating the execution settings, which are going to be specific to your environment, and then finally using Strategus to execute the study. And all of the demo resources that I'm going to show you and walk through are available up on github.com/odyssey/strategus. At the moment, the code that I'm going to show you is on the develop branch. And there are a couple of R Markdown files that I'm going to walk through, and I've linked them here, and they'll be in the slides that I'll share with Craig after the call. So let me bounce out of this and actually do the demo. But maybe first, as a quick aside, I did a quick, I used the comparator selection explorer to see how well celecoxib and diclofenac line up, and it's pretty good. So I think this will be a nice example to walk through. Let me switch over to R. So unlike the previous presenters, I don't have a real nice slick application to show you, but I will walk you through how you would go about using Strategus to create the JSON specification that is used to design the study. So first and foremost, the cohorts that I'm using for this study are actually embedded inside of the Strategus package. You could very well design and download those from Atlas and bring them in for use. In this code, what I'm doing is actually just sourcing them directly from the package. But more importantly, down further here, where I'm sourcing the settings function from the cohort generator module, this is exposing a settings function that allows me to design the various elements that will go into the JSON specification. So in this case, there are kind of three main parts that I need to specify for the cohort generator: the cohort definitions themselves, the negative control outcomes that I want to use for empirical calibration with cohort method, and finally, the cohort generator module specifications themselves, which in the case of cohort generator simply comes down to deciding whether or not you would like to generate the cohort statistics for the cohorts themselves. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing for the cohort diagnostics module. So by downloading this settings function, it exposes a function for creating the cohort diagnostic specs, in which I can decide which cohort diagnostics I would actually like to run against the cohorts in my study. Again, these are being captured inside of a variable that we'll later use to assemble the full JSON specification. Similar process again for cohort incidence. We're going to define the different target cohorts that are going to be used in the incidence rate calculation. We're going to also specify the outcomes of interest and the time at risk windows that we are interested in. So in this case, we're looking at time on the drug as well as a specific time on the drug plus a offset of 365 days from the start of the exposure. All of these analysis choices go into the incident rate design and effectively go into this cohort incidence module specification. And finally, similarly for cohort method, we're assembling up all of the targets and outcomes of interest, including the negative control outcomes. We are creating the different covariate settings, the cohort method data arguments, and so on. So I'll just scroll down to the bottom. And finally, the way that this is all put together is in this bottom section here. We define the full analysis specification by assembling all of the pieces taken from above. So here we have the cohort definitions, the negative control outcomes, the cohort generator, cohort diagnostics, cohort incidence, and cohort method module specifications. And then we save that as a JSON file, which I'll attempt to show here. And I've collapsed some of the sections that have the different settings, but effectively the structure of this document fully describes all of the modules and all of the analytic choices that I just made. So next, what we would want to do is take this analysis specification and run it through Strategus. And to do that, we have to establish the execution settings. So this is where in each of the network's sites, you would define the execution settings specific to your environment. So how would you connect to your OMOP CDM? Where do you want to store the results in terms of the results schema, and where should the files be written out to? And so this script to create the execution settings results in a very small JSON document with the connection details reference, which is stored securely using an R package called keyring, and all of the other settings that I'm going to use when I'm running the study itself. So lastly, when we want to actually execute the study, this last script, this R markdown piece, is used to do exactly that. And to run the study, we need a few pieces in place. So the first thing that we set up is the place where we're going to store the different Strategus modules that I mentioned earlier. We will then read in the analysis specifications, which in this case is just that JSON document that I was showing you earlier. We would also read in the execution settings that I was also showing earlier, and then executing the study itself becomes a simple command to just basically pass in the analysis specifications for the study, the execution settings for your environment, and then an execution script folder, which you can optionally put to just capture some of the execution script output. And so I ran this previously, and you can see how this looks. Effectively, it's just a whole lot of output showing that the study ran. And then if I were to switch to the file system, as we do with all of our network studies, the output is actually captured as CSVs. Sorry, let me just bring that over. So each of the modules themselves captures its specific output, as well as the database information. This is basically captured from the CDM source information in your CDM. And all of these results would then be provided back to the network site, which is fairly consistent with the way that network studies operate now. So I think that uses up all of my time. So I will stop here. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.